Hi there, folks. Saber4 here, going to fire off a quick little update as we have seen a big riser in the meta over the last couple of weeks. This is a supplement to some of our Beat the Meta decks, and today we're going to talk about the Jump to Lightspeed Darth Vader. If you haven't encountered this already, you probably will, especially if you're sitting at a PQ. This deck has really risen over the past couple of weeks and finished just outside of the top 8 at the regional. It's a very cheap deck to build, and it's a very easy deck to play, and it is a very consistent deck to play, so it is one that you want to watch out for. What we'll go through in here, we'll do a quick leader profile, we'll do a deck profile from the deck that finished 9th at the regional, we'll talk about play patterns and key units, and then I'm going to run through the 5 major meta decks and talk about how to beat it with each of them. We'll give you some general tips at the end, and then we'll be out of here. If you have not already, please subscribe to the channel. Really helps us out with growth a ton, and would love to see you be a part of the discussion. All right, this is Darth Vader, the Victor Squadron leader. He is a command villainy leader, and has an action that if you exhaust him, if you attack with a non-token vehicle this phase, create a TIE Fighter token. He is a 5/6 vanilla ground unit if he deploys to the ground with the Force, Imperial, and Sith and Pilot traits, almost none of which he uses in the deck. And then a 5/5 upgrade as a pilot that also creates 2 fighter tokens. So if he is put out as a pilot, he generates 2 fighter tokens along with whatever he's got. They are, of course, exhausted, as all things are when they come in, but that does add to the kind of swarm that they're building. This is very much a swarm deck. And the first thing to notice here is that you have a total of 14 units that cost 1. And so the goal of this deck is to drop a pair of them on turn 1 and then kind of get off to the races, because their ideal is to play more things than you can counter at once, so that they can begin generating that TIE swarm and then do some things to insulate that TIE swarm. Such as taking something out with the Eager Escort Fighter, which allows them to have attacked with a vehicle, or putting down the Lurking TIE Phantom, which insulates them from Power of the Dark Side. The Sanctioner Shuttle here, since you're ideally dropping a couple of units on turn 1, can capture a turn 1 or 2 play, and really kind of slow down a ground game, as can No Good to Me Dead. Then you start to have some bigger units here. You have the Stolen AT Hauler. You've got some Waylays to be able to bounce them back. You've got the Geonosis Patrol Fighter, which can bounce it back. You have Victor Leader out here, which grows all of the space units. You have the Clone Combat Squad, which is a big unit for them, especially if they start to drop a lot of TIE Fighters, because if you go through turn 1, turn 2, you haven't been able to clear anything off their board. Let's say that they've dropped 2 of their turn 1s, they've dropped 1 of their turn 2s, they've generated a TIE token. Now they're able to put that clone squadron on the board. You're talking about something that was a 3/3 and +1/+1 for every friendly space unit. And so you start to have some very, very major problems if you have encountered their ideal drop. The Shuttle ST-140 is a shielded unit, and it allows you to grab other shields or to do other things where you are moving around token upgrades. The Overwhelming Barrage is the highest cost thing in here, so they're actually going 1 above their highest cost in order to play their leader. Out of the sideboard, you've got a couple of little small pieces of tech, adding the extra No Good to Me Dead, adding a couple of Bazine, and Swoop Down if they have to deal with something that really is threatening them on the ground. But this deck is very straightforward. Play a lot of vehicles, more than your opponent can deal with, create a swarm, attack with swarm, and work to kind of overwhelm your opponents. Elegantly simple, but difficult to beat. So the play patterns here: multiple turn run drops, insulating them from control, and ensure that a non-token vehicle can attack on turn 2, and then begin building that swarm. That swarm also further insulates them from control because they'll lose a token. It's death by 1,000 cuts from that point, because at that point you start to talk about, even if they got down 2 of their 2/1s, for this turn, those two attacked for 4 next turn, plus the tie token they created, plus whatever it was that they put down. If they put down Victor Leader, those two attacked for a total of 6 on turn 2. They put down a token that became a 2/2 token, and then whatever else they've got out there. And so as they continue to generate, they continue to grow and grow in space, and can very quickly overwhelm if you don't do something about it. Bolstered by their leader flip, Victor Leader and Clone 1 and Clone Combat Squadron are very, very difficult units to deal with, because each of them can become a 8 or 9 health unit out there in space, and really swing a game quickly. They have Surprise Strike that they can pop you with late. They have Overwhelming Barrage that they can use off of one of these, especially after that Vader on or around that Vader flip, or off of Clone Combat Squadron with a couple of things in play to really kind of clear the board. They have no ground game to speak of, and just ways to slow it down. But those ways to slow it down effectively build their board and make them very difficult to deal with. Let's talk about how to beat it. Sabine. We're going to talk about Sabine in terms of ECL. The thing about that Darth Vader deck is that it needs to play 2 cards on turn 1, or it wants to play 2 cards on turn 1. So a turn 1 ground unit, ideally Sabine, and then take initiative, is a great way to start into this deck, because you're going to turn to your ideal play line is to turn to ECL Sabine's Masterpiece and use the ping damage to defeat the other unit. If you can do that before they get an opportunity to attack, then you have effectively stopped the swarm for 1 turn, and done so in a way that left you behind probably a 2 health space unit. What you should not do is attack with that ground unit first, because that leads to the idea of a Sanctioner Shuttle and a capture, which removes the ability to ping and gives them a 3rd unit, plus gives them the ability to start that swarm generation. You also don't want to. You also would prefer not to hit with Wing Leader, because they can still swing back into that Wing Leader, generate, or swing back into the base, generate their tie token, put down Sanctioner Shuttle, capture the unit with experience, and then they're kind of off to the races, because you've got a Wing Leader that went away if you ECL'd it, or you've got a Wing Leader that just had 1 health and they crashed a tie into it without any difficulty. They captured your unit and you're stuck. The alternate play line is to ECL into the turn 1 drop with one of your space units that can survive combat, and then take initiative. So, like, not the Phoenix Squadron A-Wing into the TIE LN, but Red Squadron or Green Squadron A-Wing will work. Any of your turn 1 space plays can work, if you have something that has just 1 attack out there. But then getting initiative and not using your ping at this point is critical. As I said, don't use a Wing Leader to load up on something that costs 3 or less. You want to hold back on Poe, especially if you have kept space limited for that Vader flip turn. Get him on the table. Get him out there. Force them to deal with him if they are going to be able to, but do not attack with him until you have to, because we want to just be able to discard a card and get rid of Vader, or let Vader come to the ground and let Poe just take care of him. Chewbacca or Luke aboard a ship can really cause problems, because they can start picking off those non-token units very, very, very efficiently. And so this is kind of what you want as far as Sabine ECL goes. Kira. Couple of strategies here. The first one would be to ramp aggressively. We're skipping playing Sentinels. We're skipping playing, we might still put Pershing down, because we know we're going to get 2 different things the first round. But we're going to prefer to resupply over Super Laser Tech, because we don't have a good way to go out and deal with that Sanctioner Shuttle. And that means that playing a Super Laser Technician is going to be a way that it gets captured, and then I can't get that resource. I have to find a way to kill the Sanctioner Shuttle, at which point it comes back to me before I can kill it to get the resource. And so I've really wasted a lot of time trying to deal with 1 resource. I resource the small ground units, because I'm just not going to give you anything to capture. I would prefer, in this very, very limited instance, opening up with Inferno 4. My goal here is to ramp aggressively and get to Overwhelming Barrage Super Laser Blast, one of those things that clears the board, because I'm going to be able to keep their board a little bit smaller with my control, and then get to Snoke. Because once I can get to Snoke, everything that they put on the board has next to no attack or 0 health and just gets wiped. Strategy 2, Inferno 4 into Power of the Dark Side. It won't stop them from generating the first tie token, but the tie token will be all that's left. They'll have to put down another unit, which Inferno 4 can probably deal with, or Inferno 4 can trade into something effectively, and we can deal with it with some of our removal. But the goal is the same. We want to negate about a turn and a half worth of their time in the early game, so that I can get to my end game with any sort of stable life total. The biggest cards in this matchup for you, the things that you want to make sure you're holding on to: Resupply, Overwhelming Barrage, Devastating Gunship, because on 5 I can put that down and clear most any unit that they'll have. The Super Laser Blast and Snoke. Very, very effective play pattern in Kira is to use your No Glory on an Elite P38, because they often have those units with 1 health, and that P38, if I take it, means that I get to defeat it as mine. I get to direct the ping. I get to put that on one of their units. Cad Bane. About the best line you can have is to let them play their first 1-drop and then Bazine. Pinging, getting rid of their 1-drop, and then it's a way that you could remove a second, or you could remove a bigger play from them if they have it in their hand. It is quite likely with 14 ones in this deck that if you take something from them, they are likely to have another. But this also allows you to take initiative if they want to play a second unit, and then play a unit of your own in the next turn, pinging that unit away before it gets an opportunity to attack. As an alternate play here, making sure you have Contracted Jumpmaster can be a very, very effective play, because it will not only effectively jam up that space lane, the 2 damage coming from it as a Sentinel will kill most anything in their early board, but the 1 that you get from playing it will also take something out. Once they get a couple of damage on it, you might McClunky, and McClunky would be able to take out one of their bigger units. It being a Underworld card itself can take out another one. This is the more difficult of the ping matchups. Cad Bane has a little bit tougher time statistically into this matchup than Quinlan does, but this is still a very winnable matchup. Quinlan Voss. If you have 1s in the deck, they're a strong turn 1 play. Otherwise, your force throw is... Therefore, force throw, even discarding a 1, is likely to remove a ship. And so just remember that all of your cards in there are pretty good at clearing off something. Play to your strength, ping units, do what you need to do in order to get rid of them, to kind of stem that flow, because your space presence is not huge. Hand disruption is not going to stop the flow of top deck vehicles. They're going to be able to play vehicles. It's going to happen. But you want to remove them and remove some of those threats as you go. Save that targeted attack, save that force throw for being able to take out one of the high threat targets, for being able to take out Victor Leader, for being able to throw one of your big things into a clone combat squadron before it gets to an 8/8 and out of your range. And finally, the Spark of Rebellion Han Solo. We can outvalue this in space with our Falcon, with or without pilots. The trick here is that they're going to be able to get both of their 1-drops down. If we turn 1 Falcon and we manage to attack and clear one of their things, we're still going to be losing initiative to do so. We want to hold waylay. We want to waylay Victor Leader. We want to waylay Clone Combat Squad. Using Poe to create an X-Wing plus a pilot on a ship really creates a big obstacle for them, especially if you're able to put Poe as a pilot in a different ship. And those things that they would like to deploy Darth Vader into, so to say, not the tie tokens, those things can effectively get rid of many of them. Be very aware of No Good to Me Dead. It is quite likely that if you try to go a 5 to 7 play, No Good to Me Dead is going to catch Han when he comes out and is going to brick that. So be aware during that turn of having something else in your hand that you can do. And then Enfys Nest has the ability to kind of lock the game up for you because it can bounce some of those ready units. It can get rid of just about any tie that they put on the board, with the exception of possibly Clone Combat Squadron if they have a ton of tokens. But if they have a ton of tokens, you're already kind of behind. So those are the majors, how to play into Darth Vader and what we can do. Finally, just some general tips. With all of these, the idea that delaying the flood of ties, even by a turn, can be a real key to victory. Be cautious of cards like Sanction or Shuttle and No Good to Me Dead, because those are their keys. Those are Darth Vader's keys from keeping you from winning a ground versus space race. If you think you're just going to plop down ground units, they're going to play No Good to Me Dead. They're going to grow their fleet out in space. They're going to be a little bigger next turn. They're going to be able to Sanction or Shuttle. They're going to pick up one of your 2 drops, one of your 3 drops, and all of a sudden that pair that was in space becomes 4 to 5 ships that are out there. The Clone Combat Squadron becomes an 8/8. And if you put Darth Vader in it and there's not a good way to deal with that, that's a 13. So a really, really huge hit can happen very quickly. Any Space Sentinel presence that can survive an attack can put this Vader deck into a kind of difficult place. Yes, they're going to be able to generate some of their tokens. They're going to have to throw a lot of tokens into it in order to defeat it. But if you manage to kind of brick a turn of theirs of attacking the base and can slow that down with a Sentinel, you're in a much better place for it. And then finally, the majority of configurations for this deck, the one that I showed you that finished 9th at a regional, had a total of 5 ground units, and that's including the sideboard. And so they have no substantial ground threat. Because of this, if you are playing a deck that does have Sentinel presence or that does have some things that are lower attack in order to get a specific thing on the board, you might want to consider resourcing those in order to play your control cards and to get your higher value things that cannot be captured by Sanction or Shuttle out there. Anytime that you can put a couple of threats down at once, you might want to consider doing so, but really kind of keeping that space lane cleared for even a turn can be how to beat this deck. That's all we got for this time. If you're playing a PQ this weekend or the next couple, I hope you find this helpful. And if you're playing Darth Vader, good luck to you as well. We'll see you next time.